Alright guys, today we're going to go over the Second Amendment. Second Amendment's kind of smaller in the sense of size of the statement, but the impact, I would say, is probably the largest in all of our Bill of Rights, to be honest. It seems like that some would say, many actually say, that the Second Amendment is what protects all the rest. I don't know. There's an obvious understanding of that, but at the same time, hard to get over the First Amendment in the sense of like usefulness and whatnot. I mean, right, if you were quiet all the time, there would probably not be anybody riling up anybody or anybody trying to oppose the slavery that they want to put up on us. So, but it's not like it's worked every time in the sense of that amendment alone hasn't really just protected us, as we're going to find out. There's quite a list over here of presidents that have taken action against the people and broke out guns against the people. Some of those instances you would say definitely not warranted and could be considered a problem. So when we talk about why the Second Amendment is important, we're going to have to keep that in mind. So let's go over it. Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. I didn't point out the comma when I started there. Should have. Going to in a minute. Alright, now, let's start over here first. First we're going to start over here with what is a citizen. Alright, a citizen is an inhabitant of a city or town, especially one entitled to the rights and privileges of a free man. A native or naturalized person who owes allegiance to a government and is entitled to the protection from it. Now, that's interesting. Protection from it. Now, is that entitled to protection it can provide against the world? Or is that could be interpreted as protection from their overbearing overreachingness? Who knows? I suppose that could be litigated. But that is what a citizen is. You understand? Citizen, synonymous with free man. Okay? Now, again, we're in a pact, native or naturalized, and we have allegiance to our country. I don't know that it says to government and it's entitled protection from it, but you know, you got to look at it as more than that. This is your country. This is your lifeblood. This is your family's inheritance. You know, this is what we have to give, and we want it to be the best all the way around we can. So we really want to understand our Constitution and what gives us rights and what makes us sovereign in the best we can. Because listen guys, our Constitution is like the best form of government that's ever been put forth in like all of history. And I mean, you go back and it's all been rules by kings and warlords, and might makes right. And I mean, that's been like the predominant of the history of mankind forever, like as long as they've been recording history. I mean, you guys got to be aware of that. So like, this is the most wonderful, for something to call you a citizen and mean it, right? And mean it. And that it gives you privileges and rights. I don't know if y'all were in the scripture at all. There's a part in Acts. Paul's getting his finna get whipped, and he's like, whoa, I'm a Roman citizen. And like they stopped everything, right? Because he was a Roman citizen. And what that meant and what that entitled him to in way of protections, rights, laws, those things. Now, granted, also notice that they was just finna, like if he wouldn't have been a citizen, he'd have got that whooping from that whip. So I'm just saying, like, there is a line, even in scripture, drawn between citizens of and people visiting, or people here not necessarily with permission, or we would consider illegal aliens. So even in the scripture, there was a line between a citizen, right, and just somebody here on the dirt. So like just being on the dirt doesn't entitle you to the privileges our Constitution grants us. That's not how it works. Being a citizen is what gets you those protections. All right. So let's go over, now that we know what citizen is, right? We're going to come over and we're going to redo this again. A well-regulated militia, comma. Let's talk about a comma real quick. Comma. Comma means to separate the elements in a series. That means that though this is covering one topic, it's several different dynamics of it. Okay? So, and it's separated to separate. And that's the whole breadth and body of where the argument lies on the Second Amendment. We're going to get to that later. But to me, it is just that simple. They break it up for purpose and reason. You have to understand that there was no way to really... You couldn't get this out there, right? They couldn't make a radio announcement. Nobody could send an email. There was no like video call, right? So when they wrote it, they had to write it in a specific to show exactly what they wanted and the separations and where there was like excitement, and when they had to use the punctuations, which I know we don't really care too much, because this is a world of emails and texting and things like that. So we just, whatever can get under 250 characters, I guess, on Twitter or whatever the hell the number is. But, so we don't really care so much. But to them, commas meant a lot. All right? So to separate the elements in a series, define different aspects in detail of a whole statement. To add conjuncture, to connect two independent clauses. Again, separation, comma, literally, definition of fucking comma, not hard to find. To connect two independent clauses. So again, well-regulated militia, comma, separate, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, separate, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, separate, shall not be infringed. That means none of that. The militia, the right of the people to bear arms, the whole, like, it even tells you, militia is to protect the free state. Now, we don't really understand that as much because we have police force, officers, things like that. And then we also have something they didn't have. As a matter of fact, they were very against. We have a standing army. Now, it was okay to have a standing navy. That was what was proper back then. But we weren't supposed to have an on-land standing army. But that's a different subject, I'm sure. But so their agreement, right? A well-regulated militia. So what does that even mean? Let's look at what regulated means, okay? Regulated means to govern or direct according to rule. That's their duty, right? Their duty is to direct according to rule, meaning they have to organize it, in my book, in the sense of they're not really doing their own part when it comes to this militia as it stands, because they're supposed to regulate it, right? And they don't. To govern or direct according to rule, that's their duty. To bring under control of law or constituted authority. That's our agreement with them, okay, to do this. So they're supposed to have a well-regulated militia. And they're failing on their part because they don't even promote a militia. They don't do anything active. Like, all states, in my opinion, should have like militia day, where you go out and you go over plans or at least try to show people that that's what's proper, that we're supposed to have militia. There were places that had laws that said you actually had to have guns so you could be a part of the militia. We got laws now on the books. I forgot what state it was. It said something about it being it wasn't even the state. It was really just this little town in the state. Something about you got to have firearms. Like, you must own one. Thought that was a great law. I mean, like, just saying. It doesn't hurt to have firearms. To bring order, method, or uniformity to regulate the habits is what they gave the example for. To regulate one's habits. That's the goal, right? To bring order, method, uniformity. We need to figure out what exactly is we would be protecting, how far that jurisdiction would go, what would be the places and the areas that would need protection most, and then is that from protection from invasion, protection from insurrection, excuse me, from riots, from, I don't know, man. It's just like that whole area, because we've got the cops. We don't even know how we would use a militia correctly as it's supposed to be used. So, like, that's because we totally have given up all of all of the responsibility side of our republic, right? We've like pawned that off. We were like, no, you people, we're going to trust you, take care of us. And of course they didn't. Of course they've screwed us. Of course, here we are in this awful situation where we don't know our history, where we don't know right from wrong, where we don't know good from evil. So, I don't know. Here we are in history at this point where all of these wonderful things are on the line, and kids don't even care. They're hollering how we're horrible people. Like, this is the first time that literally a big chunk of the citizens hate our country that we live in. Blows my mind. All right, the last part of regulated: to fix or adjust the time, amount, degree, or rate of. That would be the plan. Okay? So if you ask me, they're not even fulfilling their end of the deal, because a well-regulated militia, and that means that they ought to have their part in that. They ought to actually help us establish that and get us, we ought to all be networked together. Every state ought to have a militia. Every state ought to understand their duty in that area. And we can't just pawn it up to the National Guard. That's different. That's not the same thing. Militia wasn't National Guard. Militia was different. National Guard is still like signing up, pledging service to the armed force thing, versus a militia is a bunch of free men getting together, protecting the property of their neighbor and theirs from tyranny and oppression, because that community understands that. I'll give you an example. We were going to touch on it later anyways, but Clyde Bundy, right? Old boy with the land. Yeah, that was pretty serious. It took men standing together and declaring that tyranny was happening in order to get together to stop government force from going on an American citizen. Now, again, would not be the first time that they didn't mind breaking out force on citizens. Let me point that out. So, alright. Now, we've gone over commas. We've gone over what regulated means. What does militia mean? Militia is, and I love this because in 3 out of 4 of these definitions is the word citizen. Militia, a part of the organized armed forces of a country liable to call only in emergency. So that's us, right? We're the citizens. We wouldn't be the standing. We would be like, oh no, it's more than we can handle. We should call people. Like, matter of fact, so like the flood that they had here, right? They had a flood here a couple years ago. It was pretty rough. But if they'd had a militia, right, they could have called out the militia and the National Guard to get together to start making the sandbags they needed, to start rerouting water, to start pulling people out of cars, to start, you know, they would have had a plan, right? Militia's not just for a military action, but for like a natural disaster. I mean, so you could take the militia and they could be trained to do all kinds of things, how to help direct traffic, how to help organize people, how to help get water and stuff out to folks, how to help organize a camp to have people setting up in. Like when Katrina went down, that's another clusterfuck. But when it went down, we had to wait, and there was folks not doing a thing, waiting on government, just standing on their fucking roofs, waiting on government, and waiting to die, you know. There's a whole joke goes along about a man, gets knocks on the door, cop tries to tell him flood's on the way, neighbor tries to tell him flood's on the way, and then he's on the roof, and he's like, Father, why didn't you send me? Why didn't you save me? Why didn't you help me? You know, because he's got water all around his house and he's standing on the roof. And, you know, the father says to him as he's standing at the pearly gates because he didn't make it, you know, buddy, I sent you your neighbor. I sent you the cop. Sent you dude in the boat. Sent you guy in a helicopter. You said no because you were waiting on me to save you. But here I was trying to save you. It's like, the ability to step in and take care of and save ourselves probably falls more in line with how that's supposed to work. And we don't know how. We don't know how at all. And so that would be another advantage to the militia. All right, 2, a body of citizens organized for military service. Note it said citizens. The whole body of able-bodied male citizens, yep, they specifically pointed out us guys, but you know, whatever, I get it, declared by law as being subject to call to military service. Now, that's kind of, I'm sure how they kind of finagled the draft, which I'm not sure I fucking agree with the draft in the sense of foreign seas so much as like going overseas. I could get down actually with like 2 years mandatory military or something to that effect. Yeah, in the sense of, you know, I don't mean it like, you know, let's throw them in, ship them off to war, Vietnam drafting kind of crap. I don't mean that. But what I do mean is there are a lot of domestic and support aspects of military, and not just, you know, we used to do the Peace Corps too, which I was actually a fan of the Peace Corps. And so like, it could most assuredly be a choice on military and Peace Corps, so to speak. But yeah, no, I'm all about that. When but then, you know, it gets us something, right? Like as we come out and do that, that's when we need to start fixing the healthcare. All right, all of those people need to get a base level of healthcare as they come out, every one of them, and then we start fixing the healthcare crisis. You know, so like it could be a part of, right, like service wise. Also, our income tax, we could definitely shift that over to paying for healthcare too, which I'm pretty sure it needs to be on the states, each state. There's some things to work out. I'm working out something there. We'll go over that another time. This is really just a focus on Second Amendment and the rights that come with it. All right. So again, the whole body of able-bodied male citizens declared by law as being subject to call to military service. 4, a group of citizens with some military training who are called into service only in emergencies. So you'll notice it sticks to the same theme. It doesn't really change much, you know, but here's what it does say. It says citizens. Says citizens. Says citizens. Okay, so like most of the definitions that have to do with militia have the word citizen in it. And we went over what citizen was and how important that is to understand the authority, the ability, the sovereignty. It's very important to understand who and what we are as citizens. So, again, a well-regulated militia. Now, that's just the first line, and that's what it consists of. Regulated, which the part they're kind of failing on, because it's their duty to direct and organize, okay? Our agreement is that we're going to follow along with what we've come up with. The goal is to bring order and uniformity and method. The plan sets the time, the amount, the degree, the rate of. It's all important. That all falls under that one word, okay? One word means a list of shit. So that one word, they're not holding up their end of that. And then the militia, and we don't know enough about what that is to even respect it anymore. They have literally turned it into a bunch of dang bang gomer, hey man, let's go out there and shoot some ducks and shit. You know, that's what they've turned the militia into. And it's not. It's a responsibility. It's more than that. It's an honor to understand the importance, the beauty, and the creation that was America, and what it means to defend that, and how we have really let our own responsibility go and passed it on to some Faustian sons of bitches who are quick to sell us out. Like even in that part, you know that was for, right? Also to stand against government tyranny. You get that? Like, I know we don't think that. I don't know. Some of them do. Like, some of them be yelling that Trump is Hitler and then want to give him all the guns. Again, I don't know about that. That's fucking insane. So, we have forgotten these things. So now we've gone over militia. All right. Now, we stroll over here. All right. And we look at some of the things that have transpired. All right. Government actions against the people. This is important. We go back, Andrew Jackson with the Nat Turner Rebellion. Abraham Lincoln, we all know about that. Civil War. Herbert Hoover, the Bonus Army. Those were military soldiers actually attacking veterans that were in front of our White House. I encourage you to look up the Bonus Army. Lyndon Baines Johnson. And now this one you might go ahead and be like, oh, he's a conspiracy fucker or whatever. I don't care. But JFK, right? Lyndon Baines Johnson, JFK. There's a lot there. Go look it up if you want to. But then I challenged the Gulf of Tonkin too. How he, you know, they set that shit up. And then we got in Vietnam. It cost 56,000 estimated lives. So, and they forced us into that war. They forced us into that war that we did not only not belong in, that the French even fucking got started to begin with, and we just supported because they were allies. Like, that was just a big, horrible, like, there was no way we should have been in that. Kennedy wouldn't have put us in there, just so we're aware. So anyways, Nixon, Kent State. Y'all remember Kent State? We don't talk about Kent State. It ought to be talked about. I think every year, your first year of college, all college kids ought to hear about Kent State. And so that's where our National Guard shot college kids for protesting. Okay? Shot them. That's our National Guard. I believe in a lot of things. And obviously, I'm probably not going to be a fan of shit like Antifa and those little crazy Tide Pod eater fuckers. But, like, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be a fan of that. But I'm much more inclined to citizens standing up to other citizens, again, militia. I'm much more inclined to be citizen on citizen in that situation instead of military coming in and enforcing some action on the citizens. That's a lot like martial law. I'm not a fan of martial law. I'm not a big fan of any government military force shooting our kids who were unarmed. So that was a problem for me. Part of the reason I'm definitely not a Nixon fan. And then Bill Clinton. Oh boy. Waco, Texas. Now, Waco. You know, I don't know whether old boy was some weird kid fucker or, you know, I don't know how out there he was in his words. But here's what I know. Here's what I know. Is that there's no reason and excuse in the world for them to have burnt down and assaulted in such a militaristic fashion American citizens' property who had children who we don't know they're necessarily like we don't know that he held them quote unquote against their will, because like there are videos that like where they're trying to talk their way out of these things before all that shit gets burnt down. So but like ATF and shit knew, right? Knew there was little kids in there, and they didn't give two fucks. You hear me? They burnt that shit down. They killed those kids. I always thought that was crazy how we just let them get away with that. Nobody really went to jail. Nobody really paid for that. We didn't do a fucking thing. I never really understood that, but they did. They killed kids over a warrant obtained on speculative information at best over looking for guns, because old boy was a gun dealer. What the fuck was his name? Koresh. He was a gun dealer, and so, but instead of like doing something like they do on other areas, like and sending some undercover guy in there and, you know, busting him when it was smart, like maybe when he went to the grocery store or some shit like that. Nope. They did what they did, and they killed kids. You got to understand that, man. Our government didn't give a shit. We all remember that Gonzalez kid, right? The way they kicked in the door on that and went and stuck guns in everybody's face. That is like crazy too. And we let it, you know. We don't stand up. We don't write our politicians. We don't protest at our own state house because it wasn't in our area or in our own backyard. But it's our own government. And so they can do that to any of us, you know, any of us. All right, George Bush, right? You know what the fuck he did? He had guns confiscated at Katrina. You understand that? In Katrina, you can find it. It's no problem to find. Type in Katrina, citizens' guns taken. You'll find all you need to know. And they literally took guns from people trying to protect their property. Okay? Not from bad guys. Not from fucking bad guys. But people that had registered guns that stayed home, they went and forcibly confiscated their firearms at threat of arrest or death. You hear me? That happened. That's our government. And that's not some long a day, you know, this is shit that used to be. This is shit that is like Katrina. Y'all remember, right? Like, it's not that easy to forget. So, and then we got Obama. And then we got Clyde Bundy down there at trying to hold on to his ranch and his land. Matter of fact, Trump just pardoned a couple of old boys that Obama locked up on that. I forgot their names. But just pardoned a couple of the old boys that was the militia leaders there trying to stand up and help this man retain his land from oppressive governmental takeover. And like literally, you know, but I mean, even more than, they fucking raid farms, right? You get that, right? Like they kick doors into farms and they raid people for raw milk and like threaten to kill them and shit. And like, that's just crazy to me that we as a country just allow that, right? Like that's just okay with us. And I mean, when the government actions against us are apparent, this ain't shit that, like, this is just history. Go read it. I mean, it's there, you know. And so it's like, this is a problem, guys. We don't know what our Second Amendment, what our First Amendment, what any of our amendments mean. We don't know the protections it offers us, right? Or the abilities we're supposed to have, right? So let's come back, take a look at this. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Infringed. First use, 1513. To encroach upon in a way that violates law or the rights of another. And that's us. To trespass, to encroach, to infringe, to invade mean to make inroads upon the property, territory, or rights of another. In Latin, it means to break or crush. Alright? So they are not allowed in any way to trespass on, to invade, to violate our right to bear arms in any way, shape, or form. And that's where I find that the Heller argument was a little funny in the way they put that, because it does say shall not be infringed, and if you define the word infringed, that's a whole nother open ballpark of what that could mean, right? So if you say you can't infringe it, that means like, okay, so we're talking to trespass, to encroach. I hate it when it uses the same word, to infringe, to invade. So what is that? You know, that could be interpreted in a lot of ways. You look those words up, you're going to see they can go in quite a few different directions. But all of them mean you can't do much to change what is, okay? So you can't do much to change what is. And that's what is. That's what it is, right? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's fucking serious. That ain't little. That's big, okay? Now, what we got going? When we have this, all right, and we sit back and we're like, well, it couldn't happen here. Our government couldn't turn on us. Our government couldn't abuse us. Well, here you are. Now, I'm not saying, you know, any of that was a reason to go to war or throw away our government or try to start over. None of that is what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that every one of those events should have caused a nation to take pause and make their comment on it. Let people know where we stood on that and how that was wrong. You know, study how it was wrong. Don't just trust them to do you right. I mean, damn, ain't they showed you enough that they're going to only do for you the best when you are at their door? When you are like, hey, that's not right. That's not fair. You are forgetting me as an individual, as a sovereign, as a citizen. You are trading my rights for group privileges. And that's not okay. You can't do that. Okay? You cannot do that. And we can't trust the system in the way it stands. Okay? Because even Ronald Reagan said, when I found this out, Ronald Reagan, when governor in 1967, prohibited citizens from public carrying of loaded firearms in California and had the full support of the NRA. Why? Because a group of citizens walked into the California state capitol to protest their perceived lack of rights with no intent to harm, very well read in their constitutional rights. Now, they were armed and they walked up in there and they just stood and they read off their Constitution, their Bill of Rights. Now, you would think, right, that we're talking some good old, you know, duck hunting, you know, dang guys. But nay, that is not what we're referencing. We're actually referencing when the Black Panther Party came in there and felt that they were being abused by the police in their area, and that they wanted some kind of redress to their problems. And so, straight up, with full protection of the law, full protection of the Constitution, because we used to understand it, they were able to walk in there with their firearms. They had no intent. Again, there was no massacre. There was no crazy war. There was no shooting. It was free citizens, free men, exercising their freedoms, because we used to understand it. All right. Matter of fact, all you black folks running around talking about that Constitution ain't no good, made by slave-owning white folks, blah, 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 bullshit. Do you know what the fuck you're giving up? Do you? Because you are a citizen. You know, you get that. This is your right too. And you're going to let them take it from you. Your right of speech, your right to protect yourself. And listen, the very first gun laws, it could really easily be said that they was to keep guns out of black folks' hands. All right, that could easily be kind of pinpointed from the 1600s on. There's quite a few I ran across. So yeah, you need to know about all the important things that have to do with our Second Amendment that say that you have the right to bear arms. And it's not for some dumb shit like hunting and sports and shit like that. We ought to get real. And we ought to remind them and tell them, no, we're well aware that our Second Amendment right is to protect us from your tyranny, from your standing army, which is like 1.5 million, right? 1.5 million active military, 3.5 million active law enforcement. So roughly 5 million government paid, I guess, what would you call it? I mean, I hate to use the word enforcers, but, you know, at present, that's the one that comes to mind. So you got like 5 million enforcers paid for by our federal government and state governments to keep us in line kind of shit. Matter of fact, just to touch on that too, you notice that some of the cops are going around changing the protect and serve motto. They're getting rid of that. They're getting rid of protect and serve. That's scary, right? Because that's what they're fucking there for. And if they're not there to protect and serve and they're there to enforce laws, that redefines them. Does that not make them stormtroopers instead of public servants? So, you know, does that not make them potential government thugs versus service to the people kind of thing? Because protect and serve, that used to mean something. Now, granted, they hadn't been taking that very serious anyways. Lots of the cops that I've ran into are kind of jaded and kind of like no smiles. You know what I mean? None of them smile. And so that's not no good, right? That's not no good. They ought to remember that, you know, people make simple mistakes. Of course, that gets into the whole, we got a lot more laws on the books than we could even possibly fathom. And until they start stripping those away, they leave it to where they can lock you up for any fucking reason they want to. Again, we've allowed them to become tyrannical. We need to set the ship right, because they're going to sail it off into the boulder. You know what I mean? So like we're on the Titanic. We got a drunk captain, sees the iceberg, talking about full speed ahead. And I don't mean Trump. I meant just the government in general and the direction it's been taking us over 50 years. Like, I mean, really, that's pretty easy to point out. So, and just to touch on this real quick. So the 14th Amendment, right, actually reaffirms the Second Amendment. And the 14th Amendment was ratified by several states July 9th, 1868. I had to check to see how many ratified, but nonetheless, I like it. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, which we could talk about that for abortion, but whatever, liberty, and that would actually fall down to our judicial code, or property. And boy, we could really cover that on when they search and seize your shit, without due process of law. Important, we have forgotten what due process is, because everybody at this point is now guilty until proven innocent, when this, without due process of law, literally was made so that you were innocent until proven guilty. But we don't follow that train of thought no more. Very sad. It should be something we should talk about with each other. Nor deny to any person within the jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. Okay? So the 14th Amendment reaffirms, the Second Amendment actually reaffirms most of the Bill of Rights, to be honest with you. And so, like, we have multiple areas in our Constitution that tell the government, hey, back off, okay? You are stepping on our toes, right? We have many things in there that try to stop that. But we don't force them to wear the chains that Constitution forged to protect them or protect us from them. We let them go hog wild. We have literally given a drunk 3-year-old the keys to the Porsche and sent him down the highway talking about go pick up some booze. So like, we have done that. We gave these drunk 3-year-olds the keys to our car, and now they're trying to kill us. So like, we really should take back the keys and not let them drive, and we need to get this shit figured out. We need a lot more local involvement. We need a lot less federal involvement. That's very important. Very important to have local involvement over federal. We keep forgetting that we have our own local politicians that we can hold accountable for our state and what it does. And we are like crying Big Daddy federal government all the time. And, I'm sure our state politicians are real glad about that. Because it doesn't, the more we yell federal, 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 or the more them crazy folks yell Trump, 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 and they blame Trump for all the woes in the world, I'm sure there are plenty of state government officials like, wow, he didn't even have nothing to do with that. I signed that bill. Ha 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 ha. So, come on, man. Let's hold the right people accountable. Let's find Faust. Every Faust we have. All right? And let's start going through these deals they made with these devils. And let's start taking our soul back, Let's get back to what's good for us. Let's get back to, I'm telling you, state government is a serious business and has power and authority over a lot that they choose not to exercise. So, all right, now, many people have tried to question whether or not, they always want to say, well, was it for a militia or was it for the people? Even though clear as fucking day, they still want to infer that it possibly couldn't be for an individual citizen to have a right to bear arms. So what happened? All right, DC versus Heller, 554 US 570, 2008. All right. This decision was established that bearing arms is not limited to a militia-regulated purpose. The rule of law principle applied. The Second Amendment creates an individual right to keep and bear arms, separate from military purpose. The issues in holding. Whether a law prohibiting the possession of operable handguns in the home violates the Second Amendment. Yes. So they cannot make a law that prohibits an operable handgun being in the home. They cannot do that. They cannot take that away from you. Now, sadly, I'm afraid they didn't, in my opinion, protect us individuals enough. But, it's a start anyways that says that at least that this sets precedent that it's not about a militia. It's about the right for you to be able to protect yourself. I mean, that's what it was always about from the very beginning. Protect yourself from what and who and how. Well, that was to be determined by the moment, okay? They just wanted you to be able to protect yourself. So keep in mind, our founders, they didn't trust government no more than the paper they were writing to form one, okay? They didn't trust the men in the room hardly. They had to sit down and hash this shit out. There were arguments and man, I mean, smart people, way smarter than us, sat around and argued these things out, and I mean, like, almost come to blows. So it's not like they didn't trust the government either, even though they were trying to form it. There were many of them who were like, oh, that's way too much power. takes away from the citizens. Like, you got people that aren't even really talked about in the Constitution, in the sense of the creation and the execution of it. Like, because the Bill of Rights came after the Constitution itself was written. Everybody knows about the Federalists and the Federalist Papers and how the Federalists are what gave us the Constitution. And yeah, that's cool. But you know anything about the Anti-Federalists? They're amazing. Okay? Those are the boys that brought you the Bill of Rights. All right? Those are folks like Samuel Adams, like Patrick Henry. Those boys were more anti-federalists, my country of Virginia types, so to speak. But nonetheless, they kind of got it, right? They got that government. It's got its place, but very quickly it can get out of hand. And that's why when old girl was like, what kind of government you deliver for us? Franklin was like, a republic, if you can keep it. That means you got to do something. That means that you have a responsibility to hold these people accountable. That you have a responsibility to know what it is to be free and be sovereign and demand that they treat you as such. All right? You don't have to be somebody's slave. That is what America was all about. And, you know, and of course I'm going to get the fucking idiots talking about, well, there was slavery when the Constitution was written. Man, you know what? Go and look at the first draft of the Declaration of Independence covered slavery, and they voted that shit out. All right, but the first draft, the one Thomas Jefferson wrote, got right into slavery, talking about how it was an egregious practice and not good for the long term of the country. Washington lamented on the fact it wasn't good for the long term of the country. Thomas Paine talked about it being egregious and horrible. Many people have called it the stain of. And I think all of that's appropriate because it was the most horrible, egregious act we ever did as a country. And then followed it up to fix it by another horrible and egregious act, like perpetual ignorance. But I'm going to wrap it up with this, all right? Jefferson said, experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. This ain't new, guys. You know, we've put up with a lot of shit. We don't ever want to go this route. You know, we don't never want to go to a whole, like, everybody flip out and start killing each other. That's crazy. Like, this whole thing was supposed to be to put a stall on that, to try and prevent that, to give us other options, to give us rules and regulations to hold them by, because that's what a republic is, right? We set laws and rules and everybody has to follow them, including the king, the president, the pope, the whatever. All right, we're supposed to have rules for that reason. So I don't know. I just know that we've got to learn our Constitution. We've got to go back and we've got to figure out how to get our country back. And we have to figure out how to understand what it means to be free. We've forgotten. We have forgotten what it means to be free. They took history from our children, right? And so they don't even know the concepts of freedom. They don't know who fought for freedom. They don't know anything about what was laid on the line and what was given up and what was picked up. And that's sad. That's real sad. So look, the Second Amendment gives us something that nobody else in the world has. All right? the right to own a firearm to protect ourselves from government. You want to go through, you want to look, you want to see how guns were banned. It's not hard. It's really not. Just go look and see what guns were banned before there were a major action on the population. You got Pol Pot, you got Stalin, you got Hitler. Go back and look. It's not hard. You got, I think it was Castro and them put down a declared give up your gun laws, and then it was not very shortly after that they fucking killed everybody. So, well, not everybody, but you get it. They took over. So, you know, I don't know. Just, you got to look at history. You got to look at your understanding of where things came from. You got to look at the past. That's it. Have a good day.